announced a £3 million support fund for children affected by domestic abuse. Labour, who have been broadly supportive of what you're doing in order to try and tackle the virus, say that £75 million needs to be ring-fenced for domestic abuse services. And we know, of course, that domestic abuse charity is very low down the list anyway for donations. And in this particular crisis, when charity donations are down, we'll be suffering even more. £3 million doesn't feel like enough.
Well, £3 million is specifically to help with children living in abusive households, because we know the very long-term impact it can have, as well as the short-term terror of living in such households. But we've also pledged £2 million to help helplines and web services, as I was saying earlier. And of course, the Chancellor has announced the £750 million charities fund, which I'm working with other government departments to assess how we can use that fund to help domestic abuse charities. We are very, very conscious that these charities are providing frontline services that are vital. And so we are doing everything we can in government to support them in time.
I just can't imagine the hell of being locked down with somebody who is abusing you. And one of the ways that children who are in those situations can be spotted and monitored, of course, is at school. And we know that it's a tiny proportion of the vulnerable children that you made schools available to are still going to school. So teachers, social workers can't monitor those children in the way that they have been. What can you say about the reopening of schools? Because, of course, on the flip side, we've got a number of parents who will be nervous about sending their children back to school because of the virus. But we need some sort of planning, don't we, for when schools are going to open up for all of those children.
Well, you've given a very, very good example of the very fine balancing act that government will be having to conduct over the coming weeks. And indeed, as the Prime Minister said yesterday in his speech on the steps of 10 Downing Street, and wasn't it wonderful to see him back, that this is, he's determined that the national effort that we have all engaged in doesn't go to waste, and that we follow the scientific advice to ensure that we ease lockdown as and when is sensible and appropriate, with all the 5 tests that we've set out.
OK, you're the Minister for Safeguarding. Front page of the Daily Mail, Royal College of Physicians found that a quarter of doctors are having to reuse protective kit meant to be worn just once. Why?
Piers, if I may just answer the question about children who are in domestic abuse households. We're very conscious that there will be children who aren't being accessed through school at the moment, which is why we're working on the scheme called Operation Encompass, which is rolled out, or is being rolled out nationally in peacetime, as it were, to help children who are living in abusive households. We're looking to see how we can use that service to help those children. But you're absolutely right, we have to take a phased approach to this following the evidence. Now, Piers, dealing with your point about PPE, this is an incredible challenge, not just in this country, but across the world. And we have managed to distribute 1 billion pieces of equipment since the crisis began. But we're very, very conscious that with some items of PPE supply is restricted. This is internationally the case. And so we're doing our absolute best to get this to the front line as quickly as possible.
As you know, the 1 billion pieces we now know from Panorama last night includes singular gloves. Not even a pair of gloves is counted as a piece of PPE kit. So you've been massaging the numbers to exaggerate how much PPE you have. Panorama also said that this government had 0 gowns for health workers in stockpiling. Is that true?
So the allegations on Panorama, the Health Secretary will deal with in due course. What I do know...
You're a government minister in charge of safeguarding.
Yes, and if I may finish, what I do know is that we have been prioritising the provision of PPE. We have been led by the evidence when it comes to the advice about reusing particular items. That is absolutely based on the scientific evidence of the World Health Organization and of our medical advice.
Why did we downgrade COVID-19 from high consequence infectious disease, HCID, on the 19th of March? We downgraded it from that so that a lesser amount of PPE was required legally for our health workers. Why was that?
We have followed the science on this throughout. That we have been absolutely transparent about our figures.
I'm just asking you why that decision was taken.
Accusing us of massaging the figures. We've been absolutely transparent about the data, precisely because we understand that we need the public's trust on this.
Okay, no, if you don't mind answering the question was very straightforward. On the 19th of March, the UK downgraded COVID-19 from HCID, which is the high consequence infectious disease category, which requires a very high level of PPE legally for health workers. It was downgraded. I just want to know why. Why was it downgraded?
We have been following scientific advice on this throughout. We've been absolutely...
No, you just said that, but do you know why it was downgraded or not?
I'm not a scientist, Piers.
You're a government minister in charge of safeguarding.
Chief medical officer.
Well, you can laugh. I don't know why you all keep laughing when I talk about this. It's not funny, is it? You just laughed again.
No, it's not. And I know you accused another colleague of laughing.
We just seen you laugh. These are not trivial matters, Minister. And let me explain why. By every criteria of HCID, COVID-19 fits the bill. It's the biggest public health crisis this country has faced in 100 years. You downgraded this so that you didn't have a legal obligation to give our health workers the right amount of PPE kit. That is a demonstrable fact. You did it on the 19th of March. You, as a government minister in charge of safeguarding, appear to know nothing about why this decision was taken. Is that right?
I am here to talk about the domestic abuse bill. We have been absolutely clear that we are following the scientific advice, and the science on this is developing all of the time. It is an unprecedented virus. Are you
familiar with exercise sickness?
We are watching very carefully what other countries are doing.
No, are you familiar with exercise sickness?
I'm a Home Office minister. My absolute focus...
Sorry, if you don't mind, I know what your focus is. You keep telling us. You are a member of Her Majesty's government. I'm simply asking, have you ever heard of exercise sickness? Yes or no?
I am a Home Office minister. I focus on my portfolio. Okay. These very questions about the science.
It's not about the science. I'm just asking if you've ever heard... You're smiling again, as if it's all some big joke. Have you ever heard of... Well, stop smiling then. Have you ever heard of exercise sickness, yes or no?
I'm trying to
Minister,
respond...
I'm asking you a simple question. Have you ever heard of exercise sickness?
No, I haven't.
You've never heard of it? Do you know what it was? No, you don't, do you? Let me explain what it was. In 2016, the British government and every senior body of our public health ran an exercise against a global pandemic, very similar to the one we now have. It's been written about many, many times in the last few weeks. I am staggered that you've never heard of it. What this exercise revealed is that we were chronically short of things like PPE. And yet the British government's had 4 years, Conservative government has had 4 years to act on the findings of exercise sickness. And yet here we are with a chronic lack of PPE. We have now, well, the official figure is 98 health and care workers have died. We have it at 134. The pictures of the victims are behind me now. And many of these people will have died because they didn't have adequate PPE. And the fact that you, as a government minister, have never even heard of an exercise running a global pandemic when you're now on a government in charge of safeguarding is ridiculous.
So to clarify, I was unfamiliar with the exercise name, but I do know about the exercise you have described. As I say, we have been led by the evidence on this throughout.
Okay.
And so
you were on the Home Affairs Select Committee. Apparently you were on the... You were on the Home Affairs Select Committee at the time of exercise sickness, I'm told. So given that you're familiar with it now you've remembered the name, what were the findings?
So in 2016, we did a range of reports with the Home Affairs Select Committee. I don't recall us examining that exercise specifically. but we did a range of reports on all sorts of matters relating to.
So this country runs a massive exercise with all the top people from government and public health into a exercise of a global pandemic involving a virus from the Far East. And it makes a number of disturbing conclusions about lack of PPE, lack of ventilators, etc., etc. And you were on the Home Affairs Committee at the time, and you have no idea what those findings were. It's little surprise, is it, Minister? It's little surprise, with respect to you. It's little surprise that these weren't acted on when people like you have no idea what the findings were.
That's not correct, Piers.
Go on then, correct me.
It's dealt with Home Affairs matters. That's the clue in the name. And the reports we dealt with were involved crimes such as prostitution, Investigatory Powers Act. I'm not familiar with any report that the Home Affairs Select Committee did into this medical exercise, and any decisions as to what Select Committees study are a decision for the committee as a whole and the chairperson.